Where do you see the Indian Muslims placed in the superpower scenario if India does become a superpower?
I think the Indian Muslims have been remarkably patient. They have not, for instance, the bulk of them have not tried to set up a separate party. They have tried to relate in an honest and genuine way to the processes of democracy. We had a terrible, period for the last 20 years, and it still hasn't fully ended, when the Hindu nationalists, represented above all by the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, were on the ascendant, especially since the Ayodhya campaign around, and this is driven by hatred and prejudice, and all kinds of falsifications of history about lies being spread about, a mosque being built by the Mughals, where the Babri Mosque, where a temple once stood, and so on. It's around that issue that they generated so much hatred and such a mass campaign. Now, the Muslims felt extremely threatened and still do, but if forces like the BJP, which seem to be on the decline, are decisively defeated by the ruling party, today's ruling party, Congress, taking a more principled secular position, then I see Muslims feeling more secure, getting more accommodated in Indian society. But India will have to do a lot. Muslims are badly underrepresented in government. They suffer discrimination. There's the government set up recently a high-level committee called the Sachar Committee, headed by a former judge, which has produced a very, very worthy report. And it documents systematically how Muslims are actually a minority that faces disadvantage, discrimination systematically. And you have to address these issues through affirmative action. You have to address them through promotion of education, through aggressive schemes to employ more Muslims. Muslims are 13.5% of the population, but hold only 5% of government jobs. Even in relatively progressive states like West Bengal, they're badly underrepresented. This must change. They are very poorly represented in the professions. You must encourage them. And in fact, I think some of the affirmative action models followed in the United States and South Africa would be very worthy for us to study and adapt in this respect.
Do you think it is also because of lack of leadership among the Muslims? They are a rudderless community.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's true of many parties and so on. There is, the fact is there's a very small Muslim middle class that India inherited at the time of independence. The bulk of the Muslim elite of undivided India migrated to Pakistan, and so on and so forth. But this middle class is growing, the intelligentsia is growing, it's solidly secular. And I think you will have better leadership emerging. So I'm not despondent about leadership. I think it's more to do with the fact that,
outside forces?
No, look, there's a fact of partition. There's a fact that most people, in India, a lot of people, we were all brought up into believing that was an act of treachery. It was much more complex than that. And I think Muslims of undivided India did have genuine grievances which could have been addressed within a united framework of a united India, but the political leadership failed to do so at that point of time. And so there is that inherited prejudice against Muslims, plus the whole idea that Muslims were outsiders and invaders. In fact, I want to emphasize this. Islam in India goes back to the 7th century. It's more than 1,000 years older than Protestantism in many countries of Europe. So this is as much of an Indian religion,
right,
as any other.
The force of globalization is changing people. In what way do you think India will be forced to change its values, its norms, and its attitudes?
It is coming under pressure to do so. That it has a choice. I think it can resist those pressures, it can suggest alternative policies, it can bargain, it can do far, far better than it has been doing so far. I'll give you an example. India's pharmaceuticals industry. It's called the the drug factory of the world, of the third world, the pharmacy of the world, because it produces essential medicines, generic medicines at highly competitive prices, which are affordable. In South Africa, for instance, which is the world's highest incidence of AIDS, HIV/AIDS, an Indian company sold to the South African public antiretroviral drugs at 1/20th the price at which the big companies like Pfizer and were selling it. So they can make drugs cheap. Now we encourage this industry through an interesting form of intellectual property protection, but we are under pressure to change that law to conform to Western models. Now we can resist that pressure and defend this industry and the interests of the bulk of our people, and we are not doing enough.
Thank you very much, Praful Bidwai. It was a pleasure to have you here at Global Forum. We hope to see you again here. Thank you very much for your
You're
views
welcome.
and your vision and your opinions about India 2025.